Today we will be discovering the objectively best middleweight sport bike for 2025 in this year's buyer's guide. These bikes are slightly slower than the supersport class such as the ZX6R and CBR600RR, but still just as fun and a bit more accommodating on the street rather than the track. Anyway, let's introduce the 7 bikes we will be comparing today. The first bike is the tried and true Honda CBR650R, an inline-4 sport bike. Our next bike will be the Yamaha R7, a parallel twin sport bike based off of the MT-07's engine. Next is the Suzuki GSX-8R, first introduced last year in 2024. The GSX-8R features a large parallel twin engine. Next, we have 2 bikes from Kawasaki. The first is the Ninja 650, another parallel twin motorcycle that's been around forever. However, the next bike from Kawasaki is the ZX4RR, another relatively new bike introduced just a couple years ago, featuring a small bore inline 4-cylinder engine. Next, we have some European bikes. First, we have the Aprilia RS660, a very capable and fast bike from Aprilia featuring a strong parallel twin engine. And finally, last but certainly not least, we have the Triumph Daytona 660, featuring the only inline 3-cylinder engine being compared today. Okay, now that we have our 7 bikes introduced, we are going to quickly rank them in 5 different categories, and at the end I'll summarize each bike. So anyway, let's get started, starting with our first category, performance. Now, rather than go over each bike, I'm going to streamline the whole section and just show the numbers. I went ahead and created these charts to help us visualize the performance between these bikes. In this first chart, you can see the engine type, engine size, horsepower, torque, and curb weight. Note that the RS660 has the best weight to power ratio and the most power and least amount of weight. Here is a graph showing the power differences between each bike as well as the kilowatt figures. As you can see, the RS660 has nearly twice the amount of power as the ZX4RR, as well as twice the torque. In fact, all the bikes here have a lot more torque than the ZX4RR. Interestingly enough, the GSX-8R has the most torque by a fairly large margin. And finally, here I have a dyno sheet of all of these bikes, so you can see when and where the power comes on. A couple notes about this graph. First, thank you Cycle World for posting the dyno figures for each bike. I had to actually overlay all the graphs to create my own comparison chart here, so it's about 95% accurate. I also want to call out that the CBR650R is tested from the 2021 model, so that may explain why it makes a little bit less power than the Daytona 660, even though both of them claim 94 brake horsepower. Also, one final note about this, all bikes will make more power when modified, especially with an ECU flash, but none get quite the dramatic improvement the ZX4RR gets. The ZX4RR gets a massive power increase of around 30%, which would bring it to around that 76 horsepower number, which is much closer to the pack. So keep that in mind. If you get the ZX4RR, you really need to flash it to gain all its power, versus the others, you can kind of leave them stock and they will be quite fast. Also, if you look below 8,000 RPM, the GSX-8R makes a heap more power than the rest. But after that 8,000 RPM, both bikes stop making power, and that's where bikes such as the Aprilia, Triumph, and Honda really shine. The Ninja 650 also kind of gets lost from the rest as it's completely outclassed by the R7 and GSX-8R. And here I also did the torque graph for you guys as well, and you can see the GSX-8R dominates in the torque category, and the ZX4RR, again, it's way below the rest of them. And an ECU flash will help the ZX4RR in torque too, but not enough to match the rest of them. Now, moving on to suspension and braking, I want to call out 2 bikes here. The first bike is the Aprilia RS660. Being the only bike here with an aluminum frame and Brembo brakes, the Daytona 660 and RS660 are the only two bikes here with steel braided brake lines as well. The other bike I want to highlight here though is the Kawasaki Ninja 650, being the only bike here with traditional standard front forks, as well as traditionally mounted brake calipers and only 2 piston front brakes. All bikes here do have 2 front brake setups, and all bikes on the top row here have inverted front forks. The ZX4RR does have smaller 37mm forks, as well as smaller 290mm front brakes. Overall, the main standouts, as mentioned earlier, are the Aprilia being significantly upgraded and the Ninja 650 being underwhelming, which will lead us to our results. So in last place we have the Kawasaki Ninja 650. Yes, it does not make the least amount of power, and it doesn't have the worst weight to power ratio. But as mentioned earlier, the power of the ZX4RR can be corrected with a simple ECU flash, whereas the whole Ninja 650's front end system and braking system, to upgrade that to be comparable to the ZX4RR would require a lot of different upgrades, a lot more work, and a lot more money. And in 6th place we have the Kawasaki Ninja ZX4RR. I have to give credit to Kawasaki. They are out of their weight class on this one. The little 400 is a completely different bike in many ways, but it surprisingly holds its own with high-end braking components and suspension, and an extremely rev-happy engine. The ZX4RR is a cool little bike, but it does lack in performance compared to the rest. And in 5th place we have the Yamaha R7. The brakes and suspension on the R7 is fairly standard, which means it doesn't stand out from the rest. The engine is competent and the weight is slim on the Yamaha. Overall, it's a middle-of-the-pack bike in terms of performance. Next, things do get a little bit complicated. If we're going strictly based off of weight to power ratio, the Suzuki would get 4th place and the Honda would get 3rd place. They do both have comparable braking and suspension setups, but the Honda gets the nod in terms of top end horsepower, but Suzuki gets the nod in terms of torque by about 11. Given that the Suzuki does weigh 14 pounds less and has a better weight to torque ratio, anyway, it's really tough for me to grade these two, but I'm gonna give the nod to the Suzuki. It kills me to do it, but the less weight is the main thing that tips the scale in Suzuki's favor. But both bikes are very, very close. So in 2nd place, we have the Daytona 660. It has a good weight to power ratio and makes good torque. The dyno also backs up these claims, and that inline-3 engine just seems to be designed well for this segment. But in 1st place, somehow, the Aprilia RS660 beat the inline-3 with their own parallel twin engine. The RS660 makes the most power, and it did so while weighing the least, giving it the bar none best weight to power ratio. At just 403 pounds and 100 horsepower, the RS660 could hold its own even against some super sports. That, and when you factor in that it is the only bike here with an aluminum frame and Brembo brakes, the Aprilia RS660 brings in premium components and a very strong engine. Because aesthetics is completely subjective, I rank these bikes from a poll that I post on my channel. So a few weeks ago, I posted a poll to gauge which bike do you guys think looks the best, and these are the results. In last place, earning just 3% of the vote, is the Kawasaki Ninja 650. The Ninja 650 overall isn't a bad looking bike, but it's rather plain and has the elongated front end, which doesn't look good in my opinion. In 6th place, we have the Suzuki GSX-8R, earning 4.5% of the vote. It's safe to say the Suzuki is pretty polarizing. The stacked vertical headlights are not the most popular, and the side view of this bike looks rather blocky. The trellis subframe I find pretty cool, but overall it's not a popular design. And originally with my poll, in 5th place we had a tie with the Ninja ZX4RR and the Daytona 660, but I then conducted a second poll on my YouTube channel, and this time I only included the ZX4RR, the Daytona 660, and I have the Suzuki and the Ninja 650. And as you can see with these results, the ZX4RR got 54% of the vote, whereas the Daytona 660 only got 23% of the vote. So I'm going to give the tiebreaker to the ZX4RR on that one. So let's discuss the Daytona 660 first. Overall, it's not a bad looking bike, but I think the soft lines of it kind of hurt it a little bit. It just doesn't look as aggressive and as fast as the other options. Whereas the other bike, the Kawasaki Ninja ZX4RR, looks very aggressive, and I personally love the design. I especially love the KRT scheme. I am a sucker for that, the color scheme with the green. It just looks awesome to me, and I think a lot of you guys seem to agree. Moving on to third place, we have about 13% of the vote going to the Yamaha R7. I actually really like the looks of the R7. The tail section, the tank vents, they're both my favorite parts of the bike. The front end looks good too, but I'm not 100% in love with that center headlight, but overall it's not bad. It's a good looking bike. And in second place, we have the Honda CBR650R with a solid 18% of the vote. The Honda is a popular looking bike. The angular, fast looking side design looks great, and although it's not easy to see with the fairings, you can see a glimpse of the stacked quad exhaust headers, which is a trademarked feature of the Honda CBR650R that they've used for years, and I've always loved that look. However, even the Honda pales in comparison to number 1 on our list, the Aprilia RS660, getting nearly half of all votes in the first poll with an astounding 45.5%. The RS660 is like a mini RSV4, and it just looks so good. It's hard to hate on the aesthetic of the Aprilia. It's a great looking bike and easily the best one here and deservingly gets first place. Anyway, that's the end of the aesthetics. If you want to vote in the next video's aesthetics, then make sure you subscribe to my channel and turn notifications on so you don't miss the vote. With that said, we enter our next category, practicality. Practicality can be measured in many different ways. What I usually like to do is observe the ergonomics, reliability, and cost of operating among certain features. Here's the MPG of each bike and the range. The fuel capacity numbers are official per the manufacturer, but the actual MPG numbers are unofficial and could be higher or lower. The final range is just an estimate. But here you can see bikes such as the CBR650R, Ninja 650, and surprisingly the RS660 have the best ranges at 200 and above, mostly thanks to their 50+ mile per gallon numbers along with their 4-gallon fuel tanks. Whereas bikes such as the R7, Daytona 660, GSX-8R, and ZX-4RR are a bit lower, with them being closer to that 165 to 185 mile range. Now let's look at ergonomics. Here we have all the bikes lined up and being compared side by side. I'm going to draw a yellow line along the middle of the bar end and the lowest part of the seat, and the middle of the foot peg to the axle. These lines will show the ergonomics of each bike. The larger the gap between the two top lines is how much your back will be bent over. So for instance, the Ninja 650 has a really large gap, which means you will be mostly upright while using it. Versus something like the Yamaha R7 where the lines are extremely small, you will be much more bent over on something like that. As for the foot peg, I lined it up with the relative to the axle bolt. Generally speaking, if the foot peg is above the axle bolt, then your knees will be more bent. And if it's below the axle bolt, your legs will be more stretched out, which is generally more comfortable for taller riders. Also listed, I have their seat height, which will vary rider to rider. Now, I know this is not perfect. There are other factors to consider like the shape of the tank, the comfort of the actual seat material, the length of the bar from the seat, etc. But this gives a general picture of what these bikes will feel like. So this is how I would rank them from the most aggressive ergonomics to least aggressive. The R7 is clearly the least comfortable, super low clip-ons, high foot pegs, and the tallest seat height of just under 33 inches. It's a track bike more than a street bike in my opinion. And the most comfortable bike would be the Ninja 650. Massive gap between the bars and seat, and also it's the only bike here where the foot pegs are below the axle, which is great for more legroom. And it has the lowest seat height at around 31.1 inches, which means this is a very easy to ride bike for most people. Next, I'm going to quickly talk about reliability. Obviously, the Japanese bikes here will likely be more reliable than the Daytona and Aprilia. I did some research online, and I found some people have had issues with their RS660, including oil leaking and rear brake problems seem to be kind of a common issue. They make a lot of noise or something like that. I also found oil leaking issues and stalling problems with the Daytona 660. However, these problems I've seen are few and far between. It doesn't seem like a ton of people experience them. I also read that many people experience zero issues with their bikes as well. Now, with that all said, I want to compare something I can actually measure, and that's maintenance. I sort of group maintenance with reliability, so I'm going to compare a few common maintenance items with each other and see which bike does the best. So I chose to look at the oil change interval, the spark plug change interval, and the valve adjustments as well, and these are the results. First, I'm going to show you the oil changes. As you can see with this graph, the R7 and GSX-8R both have the lowest intervals right around that 4,000 mile mark. The rest of these bikes have between 6,000 and 8,000, and then there's the Daytona 660 with a massive 10,000 mile interval. Not sure I'd ever personally want to wait that long to change my oil, but it seems pretty cool that Triumph claims it only needs it every 10,000 miles regardless. Next, we'll look at the spark plugs. Per the owner's manuals of each of these bikes, the spark plugs must be changed at the dark blue line. 3 of these bikes, the CBR650R, R7, and GSX-8R, say you must check the spark plugs at the light blue mark. As you can see with the CBR650, it has a very impressive 16,000 mile interval of checking and 32,000 mile interval for replacing, which is a very good thing because it is an inline 4, which means more plugs to change and buy, and it's generally a little bit more difficult working on an inline 4 versus the parallel twins. As for the ZX4RR, its interval is a lot lower at 7,600 miles. That's unfortunate because it is an inline 4, similar to the CBR650R. However, it does require more changes than the Honda, so that's going to require quite a bit more maintenance. Also, the R7 and GSX-8R say you should check them basically every time you change the oil, which is a bit crazy, but both of them are parallel twins, so it's not the biggest of deals, but it's something you should factor in if you're looking to purchase either of these bikes, so you're going to be checking the plugs quite often. And then finally, and this is a big one, the valve adjustment interval. Valve adjustments are probably the most difficult job an at-home mechanic would be expected to tackle in their garage. Some people find it easy, but it is no secret that's more involved than something like an oil change. So anyway, the Daytona 660 has a valve adjustment check at 12,400 miles, which is kind of insane, considering they require 10,000 mile oil changes. As for the rest of the bike, I think 15,000 miles for the 2 Kawasaki's and GSX-8R is fairly standard and reasonable. It's a little low, but not terrible. The RS660 at 20,000 was a surprise to me. I just thought it would be higher, being like a higher performance bike, but no, 20,000 is what Aprilia recommends. And of course, the Honda CBR650R and the R7 with very high numbers, north of 24,000 miles. I can't believe the R7 requires such frequent oil changes and spark plug changes, yet they have the longest valve adjustment. So here I have all of these together for maintenance. I'm not going to rank these bikes, but generally speaking, the CBR650R has overall the least amount of maintenance, whereas the other bikes have strengths and weaknesses all around. So in conclusion, here's how I would rate these bikes in terms of practicality. In last place, I would put the Yamaha R7. With racing components, poor fuel economy, the R7 is going to be tough to ride daily. It does have impressively good valve adjustment schedule, but still requires those frequent oil changes and spark plug changes. Luckily, being a parallel twin, it shouldn't be too difficult to work on. Also, reliability should be pretty high given the Yamaha's track record. In 6th place, we have the Triumph Daytona 660. Although the ergonomics are not as bad on the Triumph, the issue is the fuel range is not the greatest. Worst in the class, actually, at just a range of 165 miles. In addition, the oil maintenance is pretty good at 10,000, but this bike will require the most frequent valve adjustments, which is the biggest job. And it is not an inline 4, but it is still an inline 3, which is, again, 3 spark plugs instead of 4, and extra valves as well over the parallel twins. And it's going to be a little bit more involved to work on than compared to those twins like mentioned before. Reliability is not terrible, but it's probably not as strong as the Japanese bikes in this contest as well. In 5th place, we have the Kawasaki Ninja ZX4RR. The ZX4RR has rather aggressive ergonomics, and the fuel range isn't anything to write home about at 180 miles. The maintenance schedule isn't terrible, but being an inline 4, it may be a little bit more difficult to work on, although reliability is likely strong with the Kawasaki, which is why it got the nod over the Triumph. In 4th place, we have the Aprilia RS660. Now, I am impressed with the Aprilia's ability to be a practical bike. First off, you do have aggressive ergonomics, but they are a lot better than the R7 and even the ZX4RRs. Also, the fuel range is high at 200 miles, which was a huge surprise to me. And the RS660 is the only bike here with cruise control, so that's really cool too. And of course, one thing that was super surprising to me was the maintenance intervals. 20,000 miles spark plug and valve adjustment isn't too bad, although the main fear with the RS660 is that it could be unreliable. There have been reports of some issues with this bike, so it's something to consider. In third place, we have the Suzuki GSX-8R. With really upright ergonomics, you bet this bike would be comfortable for the street. And as a Suzuki, the reliability should be pretty good. The main issue with the GSX-8R is the maintenance intervals are pretty often, requiring the most frequent oil changes. Next, in second place, we have the Kawasaki Ninja 650. The ergonomics are the best in class with the Ninja 650. Along with that, the reliability and fuel economy are both very strong. The maintenance intervals are fairly standard, but being a parallel twin, they should be easy enough. And in first place, we have the Honda CBR600RR. The ergos are very strong on the Honda, as it is a fairly upright seating position. The fuel economy is best in class with a fuel range of 225 miles, and the maintenance intervals and reliability are bar none the best. The Honda is the most practical of all of these bikes. Next up, we can finally move on to our next category, features. Features are fairly self-explanatory, so let's just go right into the ranking. In last place, we have the Yamaha R7. I know, the R7 in last place, I can hardly believe it, but it's true. The R7 surprisingly has no features. It is the only bike here without traction control. It does have a slipper clutch, but all of the bikes do. And it does allow for an optional upshift only quick shifter, but the main issue with the R7 is that LCD display. It's not bad looking, it has all the information you would want to see, but it's a small screen and it just looks old and outdated. Anyway, next up in sixth place is the Ninja 650. Yes, the Ninja 650 beats the R7, and here's why. The Ninja 650 actually has a TFT display, and it has traction control. Other than that, that's about it. The Ninja 650 is the only bike here without a quick shifter or an option to install it. The TFT display is nice, I like how it's laid out, but it is a generic Kawasaki TFT display, and it's only about 4.3 inches, which is a little bit on the smaller side. Next, in fifth place, we have the Daytona 660. The Daytona 660 has a strange gauge cluster. They use a hybrid between an LCD and TFT display. The top with the RPM, gear indicator, speedometer, and fuel gauge are LCD, but then the small screen at the bottom is a TFT. If you pay extra, you can unlock Bluetooth and navigation assist. Apparently, the navigation will pop up on that small TFT display. It's overall a neat idea, but still it looks a bit strange to me. I don't know why, but it just looks old to me, and although unique in some ways, I don't really like it. I'd rather just a full TFT. Also, the Daytona does include 2 switchable traction control modes and 3 rider modes as standard, but it also offers heated grips and a bi-directional quick shifter, but those are optional, so you have to pay extra to get those. Moving on to fourth place, we have the ZX4RR. The ZX4RR has the exact same TFT as the Ninja 650, which is a nice TFT, although as mentioned earlier, it's a bit smaller at 4.3 inches. However, in addition to the TFT display, the ZX4RR also has traction control, and with the RR version, which we are comparing today, comes standard with a bi-directional quick shifter, which is really nice for such a small bike. Next, in third place, we have the Suzuki GSX-8R. Featuring a standard bi-directional quick shifter, 3 rider modes, 4 levels of traction control, easy start and low RPM assist, and a 5-inch TFT display that will auto switch from day to night. The GSX-R only offers features as standard, which means the price is the price. You don't have to pay extra to get any of these. And also quickly, I want to talk about the TFT display. Not only is it large, but it just looks so nice. I love the old school looking wraparound tachometer. The display is easy to read, and again, it's large. It's elegantly positioned. Also, what's that too? A battery gauge? Pretty nice, Suzuki. I really like the display on this bike. Anyway, moving on to second place, and that is the Honda CBR600RR. The Honda brings its own 5-inch TFT display along with phone connectivity and a convenient in-dash navigation display. The CBR650 also comes fitted with an only-in-its-class e-clutch system, which appears to be standard for the US. The e-clutch eliminates the possibility of stalling the motorcycle, as when the e-clutch is activated, it will take over when at a stop. Not the same as an automatic transmission, as you will still need to manually shift up and down with the gears. However, you can do that without ever needing to touch the clutch at all. You in fact can ride this bike completely normal without ever touching the clutch, which I understand from most people like myself and probably you watching, you want to use the clutch. This feature is not something that we necessarily will want. However, for some people that have a disability that doesn't allow them to use a regular motorcycle clutch, this could open the possibilities for them to get out and ride on this bike. Also, you can turn it off if you don't like it. You don't have to use it. Unfortunately, it is standard as far as I can tell, and you cannot fit the bike without it, but it does only add 4 extra pounds, and I believe it's overall an amazing feature for some people that could utilize it. Along with that, we do get a quick shifter, but it's for upshifts only. I can't tell if that's optional or standard. I keep getting conflicting information depending on whether you're from the US or the UK, but it seems like most of the bikes come with the quick shifter as well. Anyway, that's a lot of talk about that Honda. You would think it would get first place, right? But it didn't. It doesn't even get close to first place, because in first place we have the Aprilia RS660. And like I said, it wasn't even close. The Aprilia comes with its own 5-inch TFT display packed with a ton of different features. You have 5 total riding modes, 2 of which are custom. You have a traction control, wheelie control, engine braking control, custom engine mapping, a standard bidirectional quick shifter, along with a state-of-the-art 6-axis IMU, which enables cornering ABS. And as mentioned earlier, this bike does have cruise control as well. The Aprilia is packed full of technology and features and easily earns first place in this category. Next up, we have value. When looking at value, we are only going to compare the MSRP with each model without any options, with the exception of the ZX4RR trim and the Ninja 650 ABS trim. Now, I spent a ton of time going over value and trying to figure out the fairest and most correct way of calculating it out. It ended up getting pretty complex when I was crunching the numbers. If you're interested in the super nerdy stuff, I have a link in the description to my second channel where I go in depth on the value and how I was trying to rank it. But in the interest of making this video not 2 hours long or too complicated, I decided just to rank them according to cost per horsepower. So what I did was I took the MSRP and then divided it by the horsepower number. That would show me how much money you would have to spend to get 1 horsepower. Anyway, here are the final results for value. As you can see, in last place, we have the ZX4RR with $173 per horsepower. In 6th place, we have the R7. Then in 5th place, we have the Ninja 650. 4th place, the GSX-8R. And then we see the RS660. And finally, we see the Honda at $105 per horsepower, giving it 2nd place. And a big surprise here, but the Daytona 660 earns 1st place at $98 per horsepower, a very strong figure for that bike. Now, I realize this isn't perfect. There are other ways to calculate value more than just horsepower. And if you guys have a better suggestion on a better way to calculate the value, I'd love to hear it in the comment section below. And maybe I'll implement your suggestion in the next video. Anyway, now that value is out of the way, it's time to get to our final ranking. Ranking these middleweight sport bikes is a lot like picking out your favorite candy. Just because one is ranked lower than the rest doesn't mean it tastes bad. What I'm getting at is that all these bikes are fantastic and any one of them would serve you well, so please keep that in mind when I rank these bikes. So enough stalling, let's get to the results. In last place, earning 12 points, is the Yamaha R7. I know I can see the dislikes already. It's no secret that the R7 is beloved by the motorcycling community. It has a great, nice sounding cross-plane crank parallel twin engine. It's a fine, modern looking motorcycle with a good engine and is set up great for the track. Unfortunately, it just doesn't have a lot of features and is pretty compromised on the street as a practical bike. Because of that, it gets last place from my rankings. But if you are a track rider, then I think it could possibly be the #1 bike here for aggressive track riding. Next up in 6th place, we actually have the Ninja 650. The Ninja 650 may be the most practical bike here, and it is likely the easiest to ride. Along with having the cheapest MSRP, it is an excellent option for any riders that want to graduate from a pure beginner sports bike to something with a little bit more power for the street. This would make the ultimate commuter bike. Unfortunately, its performance is overall lacking and can't hold a candle to the competition. In 5th place, we have the ZX4RR. Now, I'll be the first one to admit calling the ZX4RR a middleweight sport bike does sound a bit fraudulent. It's not really a middleweight, it's more of a lightweight, being an inline-4 400cc bike. But once you remove the crazy restrictions from this bike, it does make comparable power to the competition, and being a super fun, high-revving little inline-4, I just felt I had to consider it. Although the cost to performance is terrible in stock form, the MSRP is still in range of the rest, and that is why it is getting compared. In my opinion, the ZX4RR is the most fun bike here, but it's not super practical. It also requires a unique niche-style rider to pick up one of these over the rest. The ZX4RR would make a better second or third motorcycle rather than your only bike. Moving on to 4th place, and I guess 3rd place, is a tie. I really wanted to avoid a tie, but unfortunately there was no way to avoid it. The way the points landed, we still ended up getting one, and the tie is between the Daytona 660 and the GSX-8R, both earning 21 points. Now, just because they got the same score does not mean they are similar bikes. The Suzuki GSX-8R is more of a practical around-town bike that makes excellent low-end power. It has a great amount of features, whereas the Daytona 660 offers great value and aggressive performance. Really, it comes down to whether you want to be more sport-focused or practicality-focused will help you decide which bike you opt for. Moving on to 2nd place, we have the Honda CBR650R. The CBR650R has best-in-class practicality along with strong features and value. The looks are also high on the CBR, although it is a bit heavy for the class, and as a result the performance takes a little bit of a hit. The CBR is a great option for anyone that wants a practical, reliable street bike that's easy to maintain and own. Earning a very impressive 29 points, it only narrowly got 2nd place by a single point. And of course, the bike it lost to, our 1st place bike, the Aprilia RS660. With Aprilia also winning 1st place in the beginner bike segment in my last video, I really wanted to see someone else win. But at the end of the day, I have to try and not be biased and just let the facts speak for the facts. The RS660 won this competition fair and square, earning 30 points. And as you know, it doesn't matter if you win by an inch or a mile, winning is winning. So let's break down our champion, the RS660. It has the gold standard in 3 different categories: performance, aesthetics, and features, earning a perfect score in each category. The MSRP is pretty high, which is why the value suffers a little bit, but it still manages to get 3rd place in value, which is not bad at all. In fact, it's on the upper end. The practicality is a middle score of 4, which is to be expected for the type of bike the RS660 is. At the end of the day, if you want the best, most premium machine, the Aprilia is the way to go. However, you need to keep in mind purchase cost and maintenance and reliability. If those things are not as important as features and performance, then absolutely buy the Aprilia. However, if you want more reliability and ownership experience, then the Honda is probably your better option. Anyway, that's it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed. Please remember to slap that like button for me. These videos take a ton of time and effort, so I'd really appreciate that. And I'll see you all in the next one. Take care, and bye-bye.
Let me live my life, the one I'd better lead. All the blondes of fantasies, and we looked at them 11 ways. You said, look at me.